Welcome to the Warp. I'm Jack Rita. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about 10 fantastic flares to have in the game. These are all going to be green alert flares, and there are not going to be any from Cosmic Odyssey. I'll cover those in a different video. But these are 10 flares that I love having in the game. And just to quickly go over it, the flare cards correspond to the aliens, so you're always going to have the flares that match the aliens that the players in the game are playing. But you are always also going to have some extra flares. And you're going to have at least 10 flares in the game, although we usually will have at least 10, but we'll have 2 flares per player when we're at more than 5 players. So if it's a 6-player game, there will be 12 flares in the game, 6 from the aliens that we're using and 6 extra, 16 flares in an 8-player game, etc. So if you get a flare that matches the alien that you're playing, then you're going to use only the super effect here at the bottom in blue. And if you get the flare that does not match your alien, which is going to be most of the time, you can only use the wild effect. And what's interesting about flares is that in most cases, once you played the flare, after its effect is fully resolved, the flare goes back into your hand rather than being discarded. It's the one big distinguishing feature of flares from artifacts. They're reusable. In Fantasy Flight Edition, you can only play 1 flare per encounter. And so you couldn't play it more than once. And if you played it and somehow it ended up in somebody else's hand, it cannot be played again, that same encounter as well. So yeah, let's take a look at the flares. We'll go in alphabetical order. Green alert flares, starting with the changeling. So this is a fun flare to have in the game. So you can play it as any player in any phase. At any time, you may draw a card at random from the hand of the player to your left. Afterwards, give this card to that player. This flare can only be played once per encounter. So the reason I like this is that it's going to be moving around the table. Everybody's going to get a chance to do it. Sometimes you're able to play it when you know somebody's got a really good card in their hand. Sometimes you're playing it as a desperate gamble. And sometimes you're just playing it to play it. You're not worried about somebody taking a good card from you because you don't have any. Who knows? There's all kinds of reasons. One time I had somebody play it, and when I had only 1 encounter card left in my hand, I said, play this. They played it. They took that card. I was the defense, and I was able to draw a brand new hand and win the encounter because of my new hand. And I was not forced to play the lousy card that I had in my hand before, and it prevented somebody from winning the game. So it was a fantastic, desperate gamble that paid off. Our next flare is cudgel. So this one, you can only be played as the offense, and it's played in the resolution phase. So when you gain a colony as the offense, you may send all ships on that planet belonging to other players to the warp. Ships that were allied with you on this encounter are not affected. So what happens is, if you have this flare in your hand as the offense, you want to try to target a planet that has a lot of other players' colonies on it, because you're going to be able to send all of them to the warp, eliminating their foreign colonies, as well as whoever's colony it was for a home system in one fell swoop. You can even sometimes get some people to help you to get it that will be affected by it, although not often. But you know, there's been circumstances where I've seen it happen, and so yeah, it's particularly nasty, sneaky trick, and it does not go away. So some flares that have really powerful effects are really only one shot. So when you play them, they don't go back into your hand. They're either discarded, or if the alien that corresponds to that flare is in the game, you have to give it to them, and then they have their super effect available to them on subsequent encounters. But cudgel, you know, you do that, and then on the next encounter, you could do it again. So, and in fact, that sometimes, once the cat's out of the bag and people know that you have it, you can get some people to help you and attack a planet that they already have a colony on, and they'll help you because you're helping them to get rid of somebody else, and then if they win, they're going to be able to reestablish that colony. So, all right, the next one is Fury. And Fury, main player only, played in resolution. As a main player, when you lose an encounter, you may destroy 1 ship of their choice belonging to each player that opposed you. Destroyed ships are removed from the game. Now, this flare cannot reduce a player to fewer ships than the number of foreign colonies needed to win the game. although its effects still affects the other players that opposed you. Also, doesn't go away. So you've got this card, and again, once you've played it and people know that you have it, you can leverage that. You can say, look, you don't want to ally against me, because then you're going to have another one of your ships obliterated from the game. And depending on when this rears its ugly head, if people are hurting for ships, can have a much bigger impact. The last time that I had this flare in the game, we were using evolutions. And so that is a big ship resource drain, and there were a lot of ships in the warp, and so it had a really big impact on the game. Our next flare is Guerrilla, and Guerrilla is defense only, played in Resolution, and it's not dissimilar. It's kind of in the same theme as Fury. After you lose an encounter as the defense, you may blow up your own planet rather than allow it to be captured. The planet is removed from the game along with all of the attacking ships. Your side ships are sent to the warp as normal. A player cannot be reduced to fewer ships than the number of foreign colonies, blah, blah, blah. Any ships removed from the game that would reduce a player below their numbers are sent to the warp instead. So, yeah, boom. And sometimes, again, I like to just use that as a deterrent. I say, look, you're not going to be getting onto this planet, so don't attack me, or, ally with me, and let's prevent that from needing to happen. Very powerful effect that, again, it doesn't go to the Guerrilla after it's played. You get to hold on to that, so, wow. The next one is the Loser Flare. The Loser, main player only. You play it during the planning phase. As a main player, before encounter cards are selected, you may declare that both sides lose, sending all involved ships to the warp. Maybe there is a kind of overall theme here, but that's another one. And again, the reason I like some of these flares is because I like that people know that I have it, because I can use that to negotiate my way into having a deal and having a pretty good deal. And so, yeah, it's a powerful effect. You know that you can prevent the win when you've got that. Just got to watch out for the card zaps. With all of these flares, that's always going to be a problem. Somebody's going to zap that flare, and then you have to discard it. Our next flare is Oracle. So Oracle, main player only. You play it in the planning phase. As a main player, before encounter cards are selected, you may mix your hand with that of your opponent, then randomly take as many cards as you had in your hand, giving the rest to your opponent. So, very much like the changeling one, this can have some drastic effects on things. You've got a terrible hand of cards. And what's fun about this, again, with the flare, you play the flare, and it stays on the table played until its effect is fully resolved. So this is not going to be shuffled and end up in the other player's hand. It's going to stay in your hand once you have gotten those cards back. So on a subsequent encounter as a main player, you could play it again. It can really shake things up. Somebody who has been cultivating a nice hand of cards, it's a great foil for clone who keeps replaying the 40. Well, maybe they're going to lose it. So I like the Oracle. Our next one is Pacifist. Pacifist is an interesting one. Main player only, you played in Reveal. As a main player, after you reveal a Negotiate card and your opponent reveals an Attack card, you may change your Negotiate card into an Attack 15. So 15 is a pretty good card. And it's a nice for those situations where you say, hey, let's make a deal. And they're like, yeah, I want to make a deal. And then it turns out that they lied and they're not making a deal. And when somebody is in that situation, they're usually getting rid of a low attack card. They're like, oh, I've got this attack 0. What am I going to do? I'll try to talk him into making a deal, and then I'll hose him. Well, now you've got a 15 against their 0, and who got hosed now? So, and there are a lot of other interesting effects that I've seen happen with the Pacifist Flare. Situations where cards get turned into Negotiates, or Negotiates get switched in, and then suddenly you're like, well, hold on, let's change things up a little bit. It's fantastic. I love that flare. The next one's one of my favorite flares, and it's the Parasite Flare. And here's how it works. As any player in any phase, when another player loses the use of their power due to controlling too few home planets, you may immediately establish a colony on one of their home planets with one of your ships. Your ship coexists with any ships already there. You may establish another colony each time a player regains their power and loses it again. kind of weird wording there on the end, which has caused a few headaches, but by and large, it just means that, if somebody has lost their power and they get it back, you could play this card again. It doesn't trigger again from 3 encounters earlier. But this has been one of the ways that I have been able to win the game without ever having a turn. And that is, I've allied with the offense, and then we've attacked somebody, and then they lost their 3rd home colony, and I'm like, boom, I'm playing the parasite, and now I've just won the game. So, yeah, I hate to see it used against me, but wow, it's a really amazing card. Our next one is Vox, the Vox Flare. As an ally only in the reveal phase, as an ally, you may add 11 to your side's total instead of applying the number of ships you have in the encounter. So you're going to just ally with 1 ship, which some people like to do, but then you're suddenly here, well, here's a plus 11 rather than a plus 1. In some ways, this is even better than the alien that it's associated with. And there are some flares that are like that. Their flare effect is more powerful than the alien's effect. But that's a handy one to have in there. Plus 11, that's pretty good. And then our last one is Volch. The Volch Flare, the main player only resolution. If you win an encounter or make a deal as a main player, you may force your opponent to give you their hand 1 card at a time. Discard each card until you get one that you want. You put that card in your hand, and your opponent keeps what's left, if anything. So that is a great one to just strip somebody's hand down to the bone. But they have some agency. They can say, all right, I'm going to start by handing you a really good card that hopefully you will say, yeah, I'll take that card. And then I get to keep the rest of my hand. But some people are like, you know what? It's not about getting a good card. It's just about making sure that you have nothing left. So you play that against somebody, and they're hosed for a while. Or again, I've had it used against me where they got rid of all of my bad cards because I just handed them bad cards, and then I got to the point where I could draw a new hand. So it's not all terrible necessarily, but it's a really fun effect that, again, you don't have to give back. None of these cards were changeling. You are going to play it once, but it doesn't go to the changeling player. You get to keep a hold of these. So those are 10 of my favorite green alert flares to have in there. And then cover the super effects. Maybe another video will cover that. I will do my favorite one-shot flare effects and another one. And eventually I will do yellow and red alert on the 10 favorite flares. Let me know some of your favorite flares, and let me know what you think of these, if you've had some interesting stories where these cards were used by or against you. I'd love to hear about it. Thanks for watching.